Jeff, and this is Victor.
Hello.
We are from Narwhal, and we used to be on the Angular team. We helped build a lot of the pieces of Angular and AngularJS version 1.x. And as of the end of last year, we started a company called Narwhal, which we focus exclusively on Angular, like helping teams be successful with Angular. And we have some great resources on Angular. We have a blog where we blog a lot about advanced concepts like upgrade and state management and other practical things. And we also have a few books that are worth checking out.
All right, and today I want to show you Annex, which is an open source toolkit for enterprise Angular applications. It's something we've been working on this past year. So we built Annex based on our experience working with many applications, many large Angular applications. So we've seen patterns that worked, and we baked them into Annex. So we at Narwhal believe that if you build a piece of software, especially the one that everyone is going to, or like hopefully lots of people is going to use, everyone should use it, you should care a lot about values and design principles of that software. So before I dive into what Annex does, I want to share those values and design principles with you. The first one is Annex should help you develop new features and refactor with ease, in particular when your application or applications grow in size. It's very easy to be productive when your application is small. It's much harder when you have many teams building many apps that use many shared libraries. And that should help you separate what's unique to your application from what's not, and provide holistic solutions to generic problems, to what's not unique to your application. The Angular CLI has a lot of great and standard conventions there, so it does a good job. But we go one step further because we focus on a subset of Angular applications, which are large, enterprise, complex applications. And finally, Annex should help you avoid costly mistakes. That's our design principle. It sounds kind of weird or whatever, but let me explain why I think it matters. Yes? Your stack is already very complex. There is a lot to master. You have like Webpack, TypeScript, Angular, Annex.js, a lot of tools that aren't easy to understand and how they work together. So we don't want to make it even more complex. I think that would be a mistake. So what we're trying to do is to provide as much value as we can with very few lines of code, without adding extra stuff to your stack. One example would be every application we look at and we work on has a lot of race conditions. Any web application has a lot of race conditions. That's the nature of web applications. So after helping client after client to fix those, we asked ourselves if we can build something small, some small tool that can get rid of a lot of race conditions. So that's what we did. We built a 50-line service that leverages the power of Workspace and integrates into NGRX effects. And it basically gets rid of a lot of race conditions, maybe the majority that you see in a typical web application. So that's the design principle we follow. It should be that simple to understand, should be very small.
So we talked about focusing on a particular type of application, which is enterprise applications, or generally large, complex applications. Let's talk about what that looks like. So a typical app is, it's an app. You've got components, you've got routes, and you've got some shared libraries or some libraries that do UI, data, different things. And a lot of times these apps, the shared pieces can be broken into these discrete pieces. So you can have a UI library that you could kind of treat as its own thing with its own public API to be consumed, or data libraries. And also, you can have applications which are discrete pieces of your application, which have their own behavior. They kind of fit together with other pieces, but in general, they can stand on their own as a functional application. And to add that complexity, you often have different teams who are responsible for these different pieces of applications. So one team may be responsible for the main portal application, the core application. Another team may just do the design library. And these teams have to work together to make things work. And on top of those constraints or those challenges of large, complex applications at enterprise, they have different expectations. One, with quality, it should feel fast. Performance is a pretty big factor in conversion, in how much users enjoy your application, how much they stay and use your application. It should feel fast, and it should work. It should not break. I think that's everybody, but in particular, enterprise. At enterprise, you can get sued if things don't work as expected in certain cases, so it's a pretty big deal. And it shouldn't feel like many teams are owning different pieces of the application. It should feel like it was built as a single thing, that it was built thoughtfully, and that things work together, even if, in reality, pieces of the application are managed by different teams. And it should be accessible to users with different physical abilities and different languages, so have good accessibility and internationalization. Another expectation is developer velocity, and this is a big one. This is a motivation for a lot of teams that work with us, is they want their teams to be productive and to have performant builds like Alex was talking about, but also to focus their mental energy on the right problems, on their domain-specific problems, not the mundane things or the tedium of building applications. So we want to talk a little bit about how we address some of those expectations and challenges with NX, and we'll use our example ticketing system as an example for how we would go about approaching this app. And so this app is actually two applications. We've got the front-end application where people can open tickets, and the back-end where agents can triage tickets and help people. So in a typical application, we might start by creating a new app with Angular CLI, or we may just set up our own Webpack config and get things on our own. And then we'll add some routes, we'll add some data to the application, maybe introduce NGRX. And then later on, we will introduce the admin part of the application, at which point we might say, OK, there are some shared dependencies between the two applications. Let's figure out how to separate those out and then share them in a more reasonable way between the applications, and then ship it.
So the problem with this process is that it's ad hoc. And it doesn't separate what's unique to your application from what's not. So NX helps to fix that. It provides holistic solutions to generic problems, so you can focus on what makes your application special, yes, what gives you a business advantage. So one of those things that is not unique, that pretty much a lot of organizations have to face, is multiple teams building multiple applications that use multiple shared libraries. And organizing this dev workflow can be challenging. But a lot of organizations have to do it. So we have a solution for it. It's called NX Workspace. It's one of the most interesting parts of NX, and one of the simpler ones, actually. It makes so many things so much easier that it can have a transformative effect on your team and maybe even on your organization. So what is it? It is a monorepo way of building front-end applications. So as I said before, doing that kind of development, when many teams build many apps, is challenging. But a lot of tech companies, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and others, and Uber, solve this challenge by using monorepos. And they've been doing it for years. So I think we can do the same. So the advantages of using NX Workspace and using a monorepo are the following. First, we have unified versioning. Then we have this property when a monorepo promotes code sharing and code reuse. It is so easy to split your chunk of code into multiple libraries and then compose them together that you tend to do it a lot more often. It simplifies dependency management. Every library has one version of that library in a repo. Simplifies refactoring, because you can actually refactor across applications and across libraries. And finally, it makes your development experience consistent. So if you switch from an application to an application, from a team to a team, it feels the same. You run the same commands. You're sort of in the same environment. What's important is that NX Workspace is built on top of the CLI, which is key. Yes, we want to make you more productive. That's an important goal for us. But we want you to use the CLI. So your WebStorm and VS Code integrations work the way they should. Yes. Thankfully, the Angular CLI 1.5 has a new extensibility mechanism, which we're taking advantage of. Hans and Mike from the Angular CLI team helped us a lot to make sure that the workspace experience is a proper, smooth Angular CLI experience. So let's see it in action. To create a workspace, we just need to pass a custom narrow collection to ng-new command, like this. And then the CLI and the new command in the CLI will do all the heavy lifting. Okay? So what we will see after running this command is a workspace with the following files created. It's very similar to a typical Angular CLI project. Basically looks almost the same, except we have two new folders, the apps folder, where our applications will reside, and the libs folder, where we will store our libraries. So an app in a workspace is something like a distribution, something we want to build an optimized bundle for and ship to the user, ship to the browser. Right? So a new workspace, as you saw, doesn't have any apps out of the box. But adding one is simple. You can just run the generate command. The way you do with components, you do the same, but with an app. To create a new application that is very similar, almost exactly the same as your CLI application. And it's also configured properly with the Angular CLI. Right? So an app is a distribution, and a lib is everything else. You have a library of components, some state management stuff, login, configuration, TypeScript stuff, some interfaces, a lazy loaded module. Pretty much everything you write day to day will be in some sort of library. So the 99% of your code will be in some sort of library, and hopefully the application will just assemble everything together. Right? Creating a library is very easy. It's the same as generating a new component or generating a new app. You just run the generate command with lib. And what you will get is just a couple of files, and everything is properly configured in the CLI. Right? So whereas in the standard CLI or Webpack setups, it may take you hours to create a new library, because you need to create a new repository, push it to some GitHub or whatever, push the NPM package to Artifactory or whatever you're using, pull it from some other place. It's surprisingly, it's an involved process. It takes forever. Here, as you saw, it takes one command, and it takes like a second. So because it's so easy and so quick, you are more likely to do it. So instead of having a large monolith in a year, what you end up having is a bunch of, a few dozen small libraries that you can post to create your applications. Those libraries will have well-defined APIs, and we actually guarantee, so we ensure that you don't bypass the APIs. That will err if you try to do it otherwise. You can develop and test those libraries independently. And if at some point you want to take a library and move it into a separate repository for some organizational reasons, you can do it, and the other libraries and applications in your workspace won't be affected. Right? So it's safe. Because it's so easy, the ease with which you can create new libraries and compose them can have a significant impact on how your team works. Right? So that's one common problem, which is just structuring your code and decomposing your code into libraries. Another common problem is state management, especially for enterprise apps. And I think it's probably the hardest problem right now in front-end development. So NGRX is a de facto state management library for Angular in the Angular community. It's wonderful. I like it a lot. Yes? It gives you a lot of freedom, but the downside is that it leaves a lot up to you to figure out. So as a result, teams spend time discussing how it should be done, they have debates, and after weeks of discussions, they come up with different, often incompatible solutions, which means that you cannot reuse each other's code, you cannot share knowledge, you cannot share tools. Basically, it's very unfortunate. So we love NGRX a lot. So we're trying to help teams to use it more effectively. So we have this special generator that creates NGRX setup for you in a consistent way. You do it like this, and it's a little bit more involved. So let me walk you through what's going on here. So the top command, the first one, generates the root configuration for your NGRX setup. It will create the root store, the root effects. It will also do a lot of small things that you don't tend to do. For example, it will set up DevTools, so they just work in the browser. It's not hard to do, but developers don't tend to do it exactly right. And we want to enable you to, to follow the best practices and to sort of take advantage of the tools you have. So we do it for you out of the box. The last command generates an NGRX setup for a particular library in a lazy loaded friendly fashion. So you can load that module via lazy loading. So the command will create all the files that you need for reducers, effects, interfaces. Everything will be properly typed, so the types will flow properly. And to give you a few examples of what we do to sort of not force you, to help you use the best practices. The first one is when we generate effects classes, we actually put a data persistence service that helps you fight race conditions right in there. Out of the box, it works. There is an example of how to do it. When we generate tests for effects, we wire up marbles for testing. As you can see on this slide, the special DSL for describing observables. Marbles is the best way to test observables, in my opinion. It's a very powerful visual way. It's always clear what's going on, but almost no one does it. That's because you need to pull a separate library, slightly awkward, doesn't exactly work out of the box. So we make sure it does work out of the box. We provide a few helpers that make it less awkward, so it works in a pleasant way. And we also configure everything that you start with a already working test, that works and is done in a proper way.
So we've talked about building an app starting from scratch, and we said we had two apps. So we've got the front-end portal, and then we've got the agent portal. So for our agent portal, we actually already have an existing portal for this, and it's written in AngularJS. And we've got this new Angular app, this new Workspace, and we want to bring in our existing AngularJS application into this and make it useful right away, and then over time be able to upgrade it incrementally in what we call the hybrid upgrade mode. And so with NX, it's easy. We just create another app for the admin, and then NX provides utility to automatically create the upgrade shell for you, which will give you the AngularJS app bootstrapping inside of your Angular app, so where you can then take it and continue upgrading it. And so we generate our admin application, and then we see that it generates a module for us after we run the generator for the upgrade. And it automatically, inside our ng-do bootstrap, is bootstrapping our legacy portal application, and now it will just work. Which is a hard thing to set up properly. That's one thing we've seen a lot of teams have some issues with, is even just getting started with setting up upgrade shell. So now it's really easy. So there's a final aspect of NX. We've talked about schematics, how we help you generate code, and we have some runtime libraries like the data persistence with NGRX that helps you do testing and prevent race conditions. And the last piece of NX is how we analyze code and how we help you prevent mistakes. And linters is a big way we do that. And so after we've generated things, the developer is going to be touching code. We're not generating every piece of code of your application because we don't know everything about your application. So we want to have a step that's looking at the code you've written to make sure it somewhat conforms to good practices. And also, we want to look for common pitfalls or common error situations or race conditions that we can identify in your code. For example, we have a linter that will look if you're importing from a deep path inside of a library, because you should just be importing from the top of your library. And so we saw that a message showed up here, and as soon as we fix it to only import from our public API for the library, our linter is happy. And this is just a plain TS-lint rule, which works with the same rules that ng-lint already provides through Angular CLI. So when you run ng-lint, Angular CLI's lint command, it will also run our rules and all the normal Angular CLI lint rules. So you can run that as part of your CI or part of your pre-commit process. And so we wanted to make it easy for people to try NX and to be able to move to the workspace. And so we actually have a generator that will take an existing Angular CLI application and let you convert it to a workspace. And it's just a matter of saying ng-generate workspace, give it your app name of your current app, and then pass a collection of narwhal schematics. So we'll use our schematics using the new Angular CLI API. And it will generate a workspace for you, so you'll have your apps and libs, and you can separate things that way from then on. So that's kind of where NX is today. We've got a lot planned for the future. One, we want to generally keep making it easier, but we also want to add more advanced analysis. There are a lot more patterns and common things we've seen in applications that we can identify through static analysis or other ways of analyzing code. We want to have deeper IDE support, so where it's easier to do some of the schematics and other things inside of IDEs. And in general, we want to keep improving the stories with NGRX and testing with better runtime utilities and better defaults that people can quickly set up common scenarios and be productive quickly.
Right. Another thing that's coming, and I'm personally very excited about, is our basic support. So as I mentioned before, the current version of NX Workspace works on top of the latest version of CLI, which means that under the hood it uses the AOT plugin, Karma, Webpack, all this stuff that the CLI currently is built on. So the question, and it works actually rather well. It's fairly performant for reasonably sized projects. The question is, can we make it even better if we add Bazel into the mix? And so we try to figure it out. To find out how well it would work, we basically started collaborating with the Angular team, and thanks Alex and Hans for their help. And the Narwhal Bazel package is the result of this effort, this experiment. It's still super experimental, so if you care about your code, don't use it. But use it with anything else, OK? Just play with it. That's basically it. But more will come, and we'll announce more stuff in the next couple of months. The most important thing here is that if you are using a workspace right now, we are putting actually a lot of effort to make sure that once the Bazel-backed version of it is out, is released, you should be able to switch to it, hopefully with minimal effort, if you wish so, if you decide to, right?
So just a quick plug before we wrap up. Our big focus is helping teams do Angular right, and this is one way we do it is we try to provide tools to do it, and this is all open source and free for everyone to use. If you want to talk about how we help teams, feel free to stop by our booth. We help in a lot of different ways to make sure Angular is done right. And also want to say a big thanks to these folks, Alex, Hans, and Mike Rocky for their help with the schematics, getting that to a place where it was usable and worked, and we could build with it and dog food it. So thank you, and I'd encourage you to go check it out at nrwl.io/nx. Thank you.